Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let's get right to this mail, which is about pay and what people are paid, how much you should get for that payment, what kind of commitment you should get. There's a lot of views on this, and there's a lot of kind of it should be this way type thinking. But the reality is the situation. Not always things people want to hear, but it's reality. I think anybody who's worked in the workforce for longer than 10 years, you recognize these trends. But anyway, let's get to it. It says, "Dear P. Urch." Okay, that sounds more appropriate to Texas time. A P. Urch. Anyway, by the way, it's been a cooler year in Texas this year. When I say cooler, I mean temperature. Definitely not the state. Uh, sorry, I'm not diss. I would never think to diss the great state of Texas, but it has been a cooler summer, and that's nice. I still think just like is city planning a job at Texas? Does anybody have that job? Now, if we want to talk about people who clearly are not giving us what they owe us in terms of their pay, city planners in Texas, I've just there's no plan here. Anyway, dear P. Urch, I make $20.95 an hour at a pesticide company where if I do bad work, I'll be fired. So I have to do the best work that I can. If I had the opportunity to make $70 per page at Marvel or DC as a writer, I'd come up with the best work I can. I understand that's the work I choose, and I understand that it doesn't pay well. But a gig as a writer or artist at a major comic book publisher is better than working outside the heat with all the bugs and the elements that goes along with manual labor jobs. Shouldn't those creators strive for the best work possible, even if it's not Mark Miller level pay? It's better than slinging coffee to loudmouth customers or spraying people's lawns for fleas and ticks. What do you think? I like the end here. Thin. Very good, very artsy of you. Um, well, look. First of all, I think there's a lot of layers to all this. What do I think? Yeah, I think that when you take a job, when you're doing something, you should try and do the very best you can, whatever the job and whatever the pay. And if you don't like the job or the pay, you should work hard to get out of it and go do something else, but not phone it in on the way out the door. I think, and this is all just kind of how you're raised and everything. The concept of quiet quitting and some of these other things that go on. Right now a lot of employers are struggling because they've had work from home time during COVID, and now COVID is in the rearview mirror. And so it's like, well, we need people back in the office, and it's been interesting to watch that whole thing go down because the workers are like, nope, I should be able to work from home, especially if you have a job that mainly revolves around a computer where you could WebEx and you could do all this. So there's interesting arguments being placed. Like, you don't want us on the road. We're just going to jack up congestion. And what's the point of driving all the way through a commute to get into an office when you're just going to sit in front of a computer all day? You could sit in front of a computer at home. Now, there is, by the way, and I've had this argument with many people, and I've been involved in helping make the return to office decisions and what needs to go along with it. The challenge is, no matter how productive you think you are at home, it's not as productive as coming into an office and sitting at a desk. And that seems insane if you have like an hour commute to get in and out, but it's just home has distractions. We know this. And in many ways in our minds, they're conveniences. It's like, well, I can just do the laundry while I'm, working, while I'm waiting for a file to come in. I'll just, but mentally your mind needs to stay on whatever task it's called context switching. When you have context switching, you're less productive. It is proven. Are there exceptions to the rule? Sure. Does that mean it's worth, having a worker drive, 60 minutes just to sit on WebEx or Zoom all day? No, that does suck. So you have to find a good balance. But anyway, it's the battle of the time. A lot of people are really resisting, so they go to office and they quiet quit, which means they just, they go for an hour coffee, or if the place has a gym, they go and spend an extra hour in the gym. They take an 8-hour day at the office and get it down to about 4 hours of work and just kind of dick around for the rest of the time. And in their minds, it's like, well, you made me come in, so I'm going to kind of do what I want. And that'd be less productive. I say all this because those are a lot of the factors that are going into work right now. But do the best job you can is something that should be expected. In comics, I think doing the best job you can, I mean, it depends on what job you have. As an editor, I think kind of fielding like, how are these comics going to land? What's the research? What are people saying at the comic shop? What's buying? What are people frustrated with? No, not going on Twitter. I mean, social media, which a lot of editors use heavily, and they use it primarily because they say, well, we need to do research. We need to see what people are saying about the books. We need to look for new creators. We need to do talent searches. These are the excuses that editors give for spending a decent amount on Twitter. However, I'm not going to go on to Twitter. That's Elon Musk's fascist town. I'm going to hang out on Blue Sky where it's more free and I don't have to deal with Nazis and fascists. Okay, now I'm in my own little bubble, so I'm being told, kind of what I want to hear. And as long as I'm there, I've got a couple of people who are in my DMs talking about how terrible, this creator is, or this creator. Can you believe, Bendis said this, or what about Kelly Thompson over here? And before you know it, your excuse to going on and doing your job is circumvented by nonsense. And so that's not doing the very best you can. For writers, it's like, can I research how this story will land? Again, I'm always surprised, and some creators do this for sure. Some editors do it, but how little market research. And in comics, that would be going into a comic shop, listening to what it's selling, figuring out the difference between the numbers that you get or maybe you don't get, and you should fight harder to get those numbers. But the amount of actual how stuff is going, what is popular right now, what is landing with people, what kind of topics and themes outside of comics are starting to gain traction. I mean, these are all parts of the job, but very few people do those jobs. If you're a creator, by the way, and you're making $70 a page, you are better off as a barista. I mean, other than lifestyle. I mean, if I'm just being brutally honest, if you go work at Starbucks, you're going to make more than that, a day. You are going to have health insurance. You're going to have benefits. Yes, you'll have manual labor. You'll be on your feet wearing a stupid apron and listening to jerks. And for sure, that is annoying, no doubt about it. But the problem is, and I think with comics, is that too many of the jobs actually are, not much different from manual labor. I would never want to do your job, man. It sounds like your job sounds tough. I would not want to go around spraying pesticides and dealing with the elements and the heat and the insects all day. I like that. I feel for you, man. That doesn't sound fun at all. But I'm glad you're out there doing the best you can. And if the job is very painful, then, you can move on from there. But I think where comics are concerned and where creators are concerned, there's just a number of traps in there. It's a lower paid job. Part of why it's a lower paid job is because the distribution, the scale, and the attention from it is not great. Many creators are using comics as a stepping stone to get into movies or something that in theory will pay more, allow them to make it big. It's an introverted job, so it requires a massive amount of willpower. And maybe this is one of the biggest things about why the job isn't done better is, I'm assuming in your job, there's a certain amount of, pressure. If you're going to take a job to go to spray a house, then, if you don't show up or you show up 10 hours late, you're not going to get called again. There are consequences for those actions. And it's more immediately noticeable whether you're doing your job or not. With comics, there's a lot less, less boundaries. You're at home in most cases. And a lot of the comic editors are working from home, by the way. They're not going into an office anymore, and they're still resisting that. So, okay, your job is your house. So are you going to stay on task all day? And when you take a day of comic editing, you're going to look at a script, and then you're going to, wander over and do the laundry that is stacked up. And then maybe you're going to take a break and have a cup of coffee. And then you're going to go online to kind of scout for talent, but you wind up down a rabbit hole on Blue Sky about whatever, Robert Kennedy is doing to the health department these days. And then you're going to get some gossip about, what some creator said at a con recently, and you're going to chat about that for a while. And then you're going to come back to your script. And by that point, you need to call a couple people because you haven't gotten pages in where you expected. So you try and track people down, but they're not available. So you leave messages and you wait for a response. And before you know it, that's the day. And as an editor, you've done very, very little. And when your job is maybe $30 an hour, maybe at well, what am I saying? I mean, at absolute best, you've gotten into that kind of territory. A lot of editors are coming in at, you know, 24 to 28 with health insurance, in theory, working for the big two in these jobs. What, what are you left with? In a lot of cases, I think the companies don't support this much either. I've heard several complaints from creators about editors where it's like, well, I don't really think he or she does a good job, and they don't really stay on task with things, but they're not paid very much, and so it makes them happy to do little vanity projects here and there, and hire some of their friends because they're not. It's not like they're paid much, so might as well give them something to enjoy. It's like, yeah, but by giving them something to enjoy, like you get like the Fire and Ice project kind of started this way, the little limited series. It's like, okay, but it's not going to sell well. You're putting hours and time and effort in something that won't do particularly well. So it's not like that editor is going to have a home run on their card at the end of the year. It's not like they've got a massive success under their belt. So now they've got a bunch of kind of C and D level selling titles. And so so now they're, what's the argument for promotion? What's the argument for getting more? How have you grown the industry in a way that should equate to higher money? So you haven't. So you're going to stay at that same level. Do you see what I mean? It's like some of these choices create the future that is broken. And it doesn't help that people will go online after, in a post comic world and immediately segue into being, angry commentators versus making more comics. So, I mean, all these things, I think, have a trap-like effect. But to your overall point, shouldn't people be doing their best if they're working these jobs, even if it's low? I mean, it's all relative. Yeah, they should. People need to approach life like you're gonna, like you're gonna do the absolute best, like you're gonna excel. Walking through life, drifting hazily through life, just getting by. That isn't life. That's no life anyone wants. Thanks for listening.